The blood-red sunset cast long shadows over Fort Yuma, Arizona territory, as Katherine Davis gripped the edge of the stage-coach seat, her heart pounding with both fear and anticipation. After 20 hours of dusty travel from San Francisco, she was finally arriving at her new home, though home seemed a generous description for a frontier town she'd never seen before, where she knew not a soul. The year was 1878, and at 22, Catherine Katie, to those who knew her, was embarking on the most daring adventure of her sheltered life. The daughter of a recently deceased San Francisco banker, she had shocked her remaining family by accepting a teaching position in this remote outpost along the Colorado River. Her mother's sister had pleaded with her to reconsider, warning of Apache raids, lawless cowboys, and the harsh desert climate. But after years of being the obedient daughter who never caused trouble, Katie craved something more than the predictable path laid before her. "Fort Yuma ahead, miss," called the driver, his voice barely audible over the rumble of wheels and pounding hooves. Katie peered through the dust-coated window. The settlement appeared first as a smudge on the horizon, then gradually took shape a collection of adobe buildings, wooden structures, and the imposing walls of the military fort that gave the town its name. Men on horseback moved about, kicking up dust that hung golden in the fading sunlight. "First time in these parts?" asked the older woman seated across from her, a trader's wife returning from a rare shopping excursion to San Diego. "Yes," Katie nodded, adjusting the high collar of her traveling dress. "I'm the new school teacher." The woman's eyes widened slightly. "Brave girl." "Town's been without a proper teacher for nearly a year, children running wild as jackrabbits." She leaned forward, lowering her voice. "Word of advice, don't let the cowboys charm you. Most are just passing through with the cattle drives. Here today, gone tomorrow." Katie offered a polite smile but said nothing. Romance was the furthest thing from her mind. After watching her mother wither away from grief following her father's death, she'd decided long ago that love was a luxury she could do without. She had come to teach, to make a difference, and perhaps to discover who Katherine Davis might be when she wasn't defined by her family's expectations. The stagecoach lurched to a stop in front of the town's only hotel, a 2-story wooden structure with a wide porch. Katie gathered her reticule and smoothed her skirts as the driver opened the door. "Fort Yuma Hotel, ladies and gentlemen." End of the line. Stepping down carefully, Katie felt dozens of curious eyes upon her. A small crowd had gathered, townspeople eager for news, mail, or simply the distraction of new arrivals. Dust swirled around her ankles as she stood uncertainly beside her trunk and carpetbag. "Miss Davis." A stern-faced woman in her 50s approached. "I'm Mrs. Goodwin, head of the school board." "We've been expecting you." "Yes, thank you for meeting me." Katie extended her hand, trying to appear more confident than she felt. "Your room at the boarding house is ready. I'll have the boy take your things." Mrs. Goodwin signaled to a lanky teenager who hurried forward to grab Katie's trunk. "School starts Monday. You have 3 days to prepare," as Katie followed Mrs. Goodwin down the main street. She took in her surroundings: the general store, the sheriff's office, a saloon with piano music spilling from its swinging doors, and what appeared to be a blacksmith shop, the ring of hammer on metal punctuating the evening air. Outside the smithy stood a man unlike any Katie had ever seen in San Francisco's refined circles. Tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair curling beneath a dust-covered Stetson, he was hammering a horseshoe with practiced precision. His sleeves were rolled up, revealing forearms corded with muscle and bronzed by the sun. As if sensing her gaze, he looked up, and for a moment their eyes met across the dusty street. Katie quickly looked away, heat rising to her cheeks that had nothing to do with the desert climate. "That's Tyler Grayson," Mrs. Goodwin said, following Katie's gaze. "Blacksmith, rancher, and occasional deputy when Sheriff Mills needs help. Good man, keeps to himself mostly, lost his wife and child to fever 5 years back." "How terrible," Katie murmured, stealing another glance at the man who had already returned to his work. "Life out here isn't easy, Miss Davis," Mrs. Goodwin said flatly. "Best remember that. The sooner you adjust your expectations, the better." The boarding house was a simple adobe structure with 6 rooms for rent. Katie's was small but clean, with a narrow bed, a washstand, and a small writing desk beneath the window that overlooked the back garden. After Mrs. Goodwin departed with a reminder about Monday's school commencement, Katie sank onto the edge of the bed, suddenly overwhelmed. What had she done? Coming to this dusty outpost, so far from everything familiar, seemed like madness now. She opened her trunk and carefully removed the framed daguerreotype of her parents, her father stern but kind-eyed, her mother beautiful in the fragile way that had eventually become her undoing. Beside them, Katie looked impossibly young and hopeful. "I'll make you proud," she whispered to the image. Somehow. The next morning dawned bright and hot, the Arizona sun already fierce by 8 o'clock. Katie dressed carefully in one of her simpler dresses, a practical blue cotton with minimal bustle, and set out to explore the town and visit the schoolhouse. Fort Yuma was more vibrant by daylight. Children chased each other down the dusty streets, women gossiped outside the general store, and men went about their business with a purposeful stride. The military fort itself stood on a hill overlooking the settlement, a reminder of the tenuous peace in the territory. The schoolhouse was at the edge of town, a single room with rows of rough-hewn benches, a teacher's desk on a small platform, and a blackboard that had seen better days. As Katie stood in the doorway, assessing the challenge before her, a voice spoke from behind. "Thinking of running back to wherever you came from, Miss Davis?" Katie turned to find Tyler Grayson leaning against a hitching post, his expression unreadable beneath the shadow of his hat. Up close, she could see that his eyes were a startling blue against his sun-darkened skin. "Not at all, Mr. Grayson," she replied, lifting her chin slightly. "I was thinking of how much soap and water this room requires before Monday." A hint of a smile touched his lips. "You know my name. Mrs. Goodwin mentioned it. You're the blacksmith, among other things." He straightened and stepped closer. "Word travels fast in Fort Yuma. You're from San Francisco, they say. Banking family." Katie stiffened. "My family's background is hardly relevant to my ability to teach. No offense meant." He raised his hand slightly, "Just making conversation." "It's not every day an educated city woman chooses Fort Yuma." "Perhaps Fort Yuma chose me," she said, surprising herself with the sentiment. This time his smile was full and genuine, transforming his face from merely handsome to something that made Katie's heart skip a beat. "Well, Miss Davis, welcome to our little corner of the territory. If you need any help with that schoolroom or anything else, my shop's just down the street." With a tip of his hat, he was gone, leaving Katie to wonder why the simple courtesy had affected her so strongly. She reminded herself firmly of her purpose here, and turned back to the daunting task of preparing the schoolhouse. The next 3 days passed in a flurry of activity. Katie scrubbed the schoolhouse from floor to ceiling, organized what few books were available, and prepared lessons for students whose ages and abilities were largely unknown to her. The townspeople were curious but respectful, offering tentative smiles and nods as she passed. On Sunday evening, as Katie sat on the boarding house porch enjoying a momentary respite from the heat, Mrs. Goodwin approached with a young woman in tow. "Miss Davis," This is Lillian Parker, the dressmaker's daughter. She'll be your assistant at the school." Lillian was perhaps 19, with freckles across her nose and a shy smile. "Pleased to meet you, Miss Davis. I've been helping with the younger children since our last teacher left." "I'm grateful for the help, Miss Parker," Katie said sincerely. "Perhaps you could tell me about the students before tomorrow." As the two women talked, Katie learned that she would have approximately 25 students ranging from 6 to 16 years of age. Some came from town, others from outlying ranches, riding in on horseback each day. The older boys often missed school during roundup and harvest times. "And then there's Jamie Grayson," Lillian added. "Mr. Grayson's nephew, bright boy, but trouble since he came to live with his uncle last year after his parents died." "Mr. Grayson has custody of his nephew?" Katie asked, surprised. "Yes, madam. Boy's mother was Tyler's sister. When she and her husband died in that wagon accident near Tucson, Tyler was the only family left. Jamie's 13 now at that difficult age, tests every boundary." Katie nodded, mentally adding Jamie Grayson to her list of challenges. "Thank you for the information, Miss Parker. I'll see you tomorrow morning." That night, Katie slept fitfully, dreaming of unruly children and blue-eyed blacksmiths. Monday morning arrived with startling swiftness. Katie dressed in her most professional attire, a high-necked brown dress with minimal trimming, and pinned her chestnut hair into a severe bun. Looking in the small mirror above her washstand, she hardly recognized the serious young woman who stared back at her. The schoolroom filled quickly with curious students and even a few parents who lingered to assess the new teacher. Katie's heart pounded, but she kept her expression composed as she rang the small bell on her desk. "Good morning," she said clearly. "I am Miss Davis, your new teacher. I'm very pleased to meet each of you." From the back row, a sandy-haired boy with a sullen expression caught her attention. From Lillian's description, this must be Jamie Grayson. The resemblance to his uncle was subtle but unmistakable in the shape of his jaw and the intensity of his gaze. The morning progressed better than Katie had dared hope. After initial assessments of reading and arithmetic skills, she divided the students into groups that Lillian could help manage. By lunchtime, Katie felt cautiously optimistic until Jamie Grayson decided to test her authority. As the children filed back in from the lunch break, Jamie deliberately knocked over an inkwell, sending black liquid streaming across one of Katie's carefully prepared maps. "Oh dear," Katie said calmly, though her heart raced with frustration. "What an unfortunate accident." "Wasn't an accident," Jamie replied defiantly, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Don't need no city lady teaching us things we don't need to know." The room fell silent. Katie felt every eye upon her, measuring her response. Her future in Fort Yuma might well depend on this moment. "I see," she said evenly. "Well, Mr. Grayson, since you've expressed such a strong opinion on education, perhaps you'd like to stay after school and help me prepare tomorrow's history lesson. I'm particularly interested in your local knowledge." Jamie's eyes widened in surprise. He'd clearly expected anger or punishment. "You can't make me stay." "No, I can't," Katie agreed. "But I can send a note to your uncle explaining why you feel his money is being wasted on your education. I believe he works quite hard to provide for you." A flicker of something shame perhaps crossed the boy's face before he masked it with indifference. "Fine. Whatever." Katie nodded and moved on with the lesson, but inside she was trembling. She'd won this round, but the war for Jamie Grayson's cooperation, and perhaps his respect, was just beginning. When the final bell rang, the students filed out, leaving Jamie slouched in his seat and Katie wondering exactly how to proceed with her improvised detention. Lillian gave her an encouraging smile before departing, whispering, "You handled that well." "So, Mr. Grayson," Katie began, sitting on the edge of a student desk near him, "would you like to tell me what today was really about?" Jamie shrugged, examining his scuffed boots. "Don't see the point of all this. Reading and writing won't help me run the ranch someday." "On the contrary," Katie countered. "A good rancher needs to read contracts, calculate profits and losses, write letters to buyers. Your uncle must do these things. Uncle Tyler didn't finish school. He does fine. And yet he insists you attend. Why do you think that is?" Before Jamie could answer, a shadow darkened the doorway. Tyler Grayson stood there, hat in hand, his expression a mixture of concern and something Katie couldn't quite define. "Is there a problem, Miss Davis?" His deep voice filled the small room. "No problem, Mr. Grayson," Katie replied. "Jamie and I were just discussing the practical applications of education for a future rancher." Tyler's eyebrow rose slightly as he looked at his nephew. "Were you now? And did this discussion have anything to do with the ink stains on your hands, Jamie?" The boy flushed. "It was just a joke." "Destroying school property isn't a joke," Tyler said firmly. "Neither is disrespecting your teacher." He turned to Katie. "I apologize for my nephew's behavior, Miss Davis. It won't happen again." "I'm sure it won't," Katie agreed. "Jamie and I have come to an understanding, haven't we?" After a long moment, Jamie nodded reluctantly. "Yes, madam." "Good. Then you're free to go, Mr. Grayson." "Jamie, that is." Katie smiled slightly at the confusion of addressing two Graysons. Jamie grabbed his books and hurried out, leaving Katie alone with Tyler. An awkward silence fell between them. "He's not a bad kid," Tyler finally said. "Just lost. Misses his parents something fierce." "I understand loss," Katie said softly. "My father died last year. My mother couldn't bear it and followed him 3 months later." Tyler's gaze softened. "I'm sorry, it's not easy." "No, it isn't, but we go on." Katie busied herself straightening papers on her desk, suddenly aware of how alone they were in the small schoolroom. "You handled Jamie well. Most would have sent him straight to me for punishment." "Punishment rarely teaches the lesson we want learned," Katie replied. "Besides, I think Jamie and I might understand each other better than he realizes." Tyler studied her with those penetrating blue eyes. "You're not what I expected, Miss Davis." "No. What did you expect? Someone who'd take one look at Fort Yuma and be back on the next stagecoach to California." Katie laughed lightly. "The day is young, Mr. Grayson. I may yet flee in terror." "I don't think so." His voice held a certainty that both flattered and unsettled her. "You have grit. We respect that out here." "Thank you." Katie gathered her belongings, suddenly needing to escape the intensity of his gaze. "I should get back to the boarding house. Lesson plans to prepare." Tyler nodded and stepped aside to let her pass. At the doorway, she paused, looking back at him framed against the late afternoon light streaming through the windows. "Your nephew mentioned you didn't finish school." "That's right. My father died when I was 14, had to help my mother run the ranch." There was no defensiveness in his tone, just simple fact. "Yet you insist Jamie continue his education. Want more for him than I had." Tyler placed his hat back on his head. "Don't we all want better for the next generation?" With those words lingering between them, Katie nodded goodbye and stepped out into the still warm September afternoon, feeling as though something significant had just transpired, though she couldn't have said exactly what. The weeks that followed fell into a pattern. Katie's days were filled with teaching, while her evenings were spent preparing lessons and grading the students' work. Slowly, she began to feel a part of Fort Yuma. The townspeople nodded in greeting when she passed, and some of the mothers invited her to Sunday dinners after church. Jamie Grayson remained a challenge, but a fascinating one. Brilliant when he applied himself, he showed a particular aptitude for mathematics and history that Katie worked to nurture. His initial resistance gradually gave way to grudging participation, especially after Katie introduced a project on the history of ranching in the Arizona Territory. And then there was Tyler Grayson. Their paths crossed frequently in the small town, at church, at the general store, on the dusty streets as Katie walked to and from school. Each encounter left her feeling oddly breathless, though their conversations remained brief and cordial. Occasionally, she would feel his eyes on her as she taught, and would look up to find him watching through the schoolhouse window as he passed, a half-smile on his face that made her heart beat faster. One Friday afternoon in late October, as Katie was closing up the schoolhouse, a commotion from the direction of the main street caught her attention. Running footsteps approached, and Lillian appeared, face flushed with excitement. "Miss Davis, come quick. There's been an accident at the smithy." "Mr. Grayson's hurt," Katie's heart lurched. "Jamie?" "No, Tyler. A horse spooked and knocked him against the forge. Doc Wilson's there, but they need help." Without hesitation, Katie gathered her skirts and ran alongside Lillian toward the blacksmith shop. A small crowd had gathered outside. Katie pushed through, propriety forgotten in her concern. Inside the smithy, Tyler sat on a bench, grimacing as Doc Wilson examined a nasty burn on his forearm. Blood trickled from a cut on his temple. "Mr. Grayson," Katie exclaimed, moving to his side. Tyler looked up, surprise registering through his pain. "Miss Davis, this isn't exactly a place for a lady." "Nonsense," Katie replied, already rolling up her sleeves. "Doctor, how can I help?" Doc Wilson, a grizzled man in his 60s, assessed her quickly. "You squeamish girl." "I nursed both my parents through their final illnesses, doctor. I'm quite capable." He nodded. "Then hold his arm steady while I clean this burn, and then we'll need to stitch that head wound." For the next half hour, Katie assisted the doctor, her hands sure and gentle as she bathed Tyler's wounds, held instruments, and murmured encouragement. Throughout it all, Tyler watched her with an expression of wonder, as though seeing her for the first time. "You're full of surprises, Miss Davis," he said as Doc Wilson packed up his bag. "Keep that arm clean and come see me tomorrow," the doctor instructed. "Miss Davis, thank you for your assistance. You have a steady hand." After the doctor left, Katie helped Tyler into his shirt, trying to ignore the broad expanse of his chest and the way her fingers trembled slightly against his warm skin. "Thank you," Tyler said quietly. "You didn't have to do this." "I wanted to help," Katie replied simply. "Is there someone who can stay with you tonight? Head wounds can be unpredictable. Jamie will be back from his friend's house soon. I'll be fine." Katie hesitated, then said firmly, "I'll wait with you until he arrives, and I'll prepare something for your supper. You shouldn't be using that arm." Before Tyler could protest, Katie had moved to the small kitchen attached to the smithy and began assessing the available supplies. She found beans, salt pork, and cornmeal enough to make a simple but hearty meal. As she worked, she was acutely aware of Tyler watching her from the doorway. "You cook too," he observed. "Another surprise?" she asked with a small smile. "You're nothing like what I expected from a banker's daughter." Katie stirred the beans slowly. "My mother believed in practical education alongside academic learning. She said a woman should be prepared for any circumstance life might present. Wise woman. She was." Katie swallowed the familiar pang of grief. Before she changed, Tyler moved closer, his presence filling the small kitchen. "Changed? After my father died, she simply gave up." It was as though her will to live departed with him. Katie kept her eyes on the pot, unable to face the compassion she might see in Tyler's gaze. "I tried everything to reach her, but she was already gone in all the ways that mattered." "That's why you came to Fort Yuma," Tyler said softly. "You're running from that memory." Katie looked up then, startled by his perception. Perhaps, or maybe I'm running toward something instead. Their eyes held for a long moment, the air between them charged with unspoken possibilities. The front door slammed, breaking the spell. Uncle Tyler. Jamie's voice called. "Miss Davis is here." What happened? The boy appeared in the kitchen doorway, eyes widening at the sight of his teacher stirring a pot in his home and his uncle's bandaged arm. "Your uncle had a small accident," Katie explained. "I was just helping out until you returned." Jamie's gaze darted between them, surprisingly perceptive. "Are you staying for supper, Miss Davis?" "I don't think," Katie began. "Please stay," Tyler interrupted. "It's the least I can do to thank you." And so Katie found herself seated at the Graysons' small table, sharing a simple meal and conversation that flowed more easily than she would have expected. Jamie, animated in a way he rarely was at school, regaled them with stories about his friends' new puppies. Tyler, despite his injuries, laughed often, the sound warming Katie in ways the food could not. As the evening deepened, Katie reluctantly rose to leave. "I should get back to the boarding house before Mrs. Miller locks the door for the night." "I'll walk you," Tyler insisted, reaching for his hat. "With that head wound, I think not, Mr. Grayson. I'm perfectly capable of walking 3 blocks in my own town." Tyler's eyes softened at her words. "Your town, is it now?" Katie flushed, realizing what she had said. "Well, for the time being at least." "I'll walk Miss Davis home, Uncle Tyler," Jamie volunteered, surprising them both. "You should rest like Doc said." Tyler hesitated, then nodded. "Thank you, nephew. That's very gentlemanly of you." As Jamie escorted her through the quiet streets of Fort Yuma, Katie found herself curious about this softer side of her most challenging student. "Your uncle is fortunate to have you, Jamie," she said genuinely. The boy shrugged, but Katie could see he was pleased. "He took me in when no one else would. Least I can do is help out. He cares for you very much, that's clear." Jamie kicked at a stone in their path. "He gave up a lot to take me in. The ranch is just getting back on its feet after the drought last year, and then I came along another mouth to feed." "Family isn't a burden, Jamie," Katie said gently. "It's a blessing, even when they make trouble." He asked with a sideways glance that reminded her so much of Tyler it made her heart ache. "Especially then," Katie laughed. "That's when you know it's real." They reached the boarding house and Jamie awkwardly tipped his hat the way he'd seen his uncle do. "Good night, Miss Davis. And thanks for helping Uncle Tyler." "You're welcome, Jamie. I'll see you Monday." As Katie prepared for bed that night, she found herself replaying the evening in her mind, the warmth of the Grayson home, so different from the formal coldness of her childhood. The way Tyler had looked at her across the table, the unexpected connection with Jamie. For the first time since arriving in Fort Yuma, she felt something like belonging. The following weeks brought changes to Katie's routine. Jamie's attitude in school improved dramatically, and his newfound cooperation influenced some of the other boys. Tyler made a point of stopping by the schoolhouse every few days, ostensibly to check on his nephew but lingering to chat with Katie after the students departed. November brought cooler temperatures and preparations for Thanksgiving. The town planned a communal feast, and Katie found herself on the committee organizing the celebration. This meant frequent meetings with other townswomen, including Sarah Miller, the blacksmith sister who had recently arrived from Texas. Sarah was a widow in her late 20s, pretty and vivacious, with an obvious interest in Tyler that sent unwelcome pangs of jealousy through Katie whenever she saw them together. Not that Katie had any claim on the blacksmith, she reminded herself sternly. Their friendship, if it could be called that, was perfectly proper and restrained. 2 days before Thanksgiving, as Katie was writing on the blackboard after school, the door opened behind her. Assuming it was Lillian returning for a forgotten item, Katie spoke without turning. "Did you forget something?" "No, but I've been forgetting something important for too long." Tyler's voice sent a jolt through her. Katie turned to find him standing just inside the door, hat in hand, looking uncharacteristically nervous. "Mr. Grayson," she said, setting down her chalk. "Is Jamie all right?" "Jamie's fine. I'm here on my own account." He took a step closer. "Miss Davis, Katie, would you do me the honor of accompanying me to the Thanksgiving celebration?" Katie's heart leaped, then plummeted. "I thought. That is, I assumed you would be escorting Mrs. Miller." "Sarah, I mean." Tyler's brow furrowed. "Sarah, why would you think that? She seems quite taken with you, and she is lovely," Katie managed, hating the hint of jealousy in her voice. A slow smile spread across Tyler's face. "Sarah Miller is a fine woman, but she's not the one who's been occupying my thoughts day and night for weeks now." Katie's breath caught. "Oh." Tyler closed the distance between them, stopping just short of impropriety. "I haven't felt this way since Alina. Didn't think I could again. But there's something about you, Katie Davis, your courage in coming here, your kindness with Jamie, the way you see the good in everything and everyone." He took a deep breath. "I'd very much like to court you properly if you're willing." For a moment, Katie couldn't speak, overwhelmed by emotions she'd kept carefully bottled since arriving in Fort Yuma. Finally, she managed, "I would like that very much, Tyler." His smile was radiant. "Then I'll pick you up at noon on Thursday." "Or something pretty, not that you need any help in that department." The compliment brought heat to Katie's cheeks. "I'll be ready." After Tyler left, Katie sank into her chair, heart racing with excitement and a touch of fear. She had come to Fort Yuma to escape the pain of love lost, not to find new love. And yet, wasn't that exactly what was happening? Thanksgiving Day dawned clear and cool, perfect weather for the outdoor celebration planned in the town square. Katie dressed with special care in her best dress, a deep green wool with black velvet trim that brought out the amber flecks in her hazel eyes. She arranged her hair in a softer style than her usual severe teaching bun, letting a few curls frame her face. When Tyler arrived at the boarding house to escort her, his appreciative gaze made all her efforts worthwhile. He too had dressed for the occasion in a clean black suit that accentuated his broad shoulders and made his eyes seem even bluer. "You look beautiful," he said simply. "Thank you. You're quite handsome yourself." Jamie, standing slightly behind his uncle, rolled his eyes at the exchange, but Katie noticed the boy had also been scrubbed to within an inch of his life, his usually unruly hair slicked down with water. "You look very nice too, Jamie," she added, and was rewarded with a fleeting smile. The town square had been transformed with long tables covered in white cloths and decorated with autumn leaves and pine cones. Nearly everyone in Fort Yuma had contributed to the feast: roasted turkeys, hams, cornbread dressing, sweet potatoes, pies of every description. Before the meal, Reverend Thomas led them in prayer, giving thanks for the bountiful harvest and the community's many blessings. As they ate, Katie found herself the object of curious glances and knowing smiles. Clearly, her arrival on Tyler Grayson's arm had not gone unnoticed. Sarah Miller, seated across the table, gave her a measuring look before leaning over to whisper something to her companion. Katie felt a momentary unease, but Tyler's warm hand covering hers beneath the table banished the feeling. After the meal, there was music, fiddle and guitar played by local men who knew only a handful of tunes but played them with enthusiastic spirit. When Tyler asked her to dance, Katie hesitated only briefly before accepting. "I'm not very good at this," she confessed as he led her to the cleared area serving as a dance floor. "Neither am I," he admitted. "Alina tried to teach me, but I've got 2 left feet. We'll stumble through together." And stumble they did, laughing at their missteps and gradually finding their rhythm as the fiddle played a slow waltz. Tyler's hand at her waist was strong and sure, his eyes never leaving hers as they moved among the other couples. "People are watching us," Katie murmured, acutely aware of the town's attention. "Let them," Tyler replied. "I'm proud to be seen with the prettiest, smartest woman in Arizona territory." Katie laughed. "Such flattery, Mr. Grayson, not flattery if it's true." His expression grew serious. "I want to show you something after the celebration. Would you come riding with me tomorrow?" "I'd like that, but I should warn you I'm not much of a rider." "Don't worry. I've got the perfect horse for you, gentle as a lamb." The remainder of the celebration passed in a happy blur. Katie found herself surrounded by townspeople who seemed genuinely pleased by Tyler's interest in her. Even Jamie unbent enough to ask her to dance during a lively reel, his adolescent dignity momentarily forgotten as he whirled her around the makeshift dance floor. By the time Tyler escorted her back to the boarding house, stars were appearing in the clear night sky. On the porch, sheltered from curious eyes by the gathering darkness, he took her hands in his. "Thank you for today," he said softly. "It's been the best Thanksgiving I've had in many years." "For me as well," Katie replied, meaning it. "I wasn't sure I'd find a place here when I first arrived. And now I can't imagine being anywhere else." Tyler's eyes darkened as he gazed down at her. Slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, he leaned forward. Katie's heart hammered in her chest as she realized he was going to kiss her. She had never been kissed before, a fact that both embarrassed and frightened her. At the last moment, she turned her face slightly, and his lips grazed her cheek instead of finding her mouth. Tyler pulled back, confusion and concern in his eyes. "I'm sorry," Katie whispered, mortified. I've never been kissed," she admitted, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. Tyler's expression softened with understanding. He reached up to touch her cheek gently. "I've never been kissed," she said. The cowboy took off his hat and replied, "Let's start slow." He leaned in again, this time pressing his lips to her forehead in a gesture so tender it brought tears to Katie's eyes. "Good night, Miss Davis," he murmured. "I'll see you tomorrow at 10. Katie watched him walk away, her heart full of emotions she couldn't begin to untangle. Behind her, the boarding house door opened, and Mrs. Miller's voice broke the spell. "Miss Davis, is everything all right?" "Yes," Katie said, turning with a smile she couldn't suppress. "Everything is wonderful." The next morning dawned clear and crisp, perfect weather for riding. Katie dressed in her most practical skirt and a warm jacket, her stomach fluttering with anticipation. At precisely 10 o'clock, Tyler appeared at the boarding house with 2 horses, his own chestnut gelding and a smaller, dappled mare. "This is Daisy," Tyler said, helping Katie mount. "She's as steady as they come." True to his word, the mare was gentle, responding easily to Katie's tentative commands as they rode out of town. Tyler led them along a well-worn trail that followed the Colorado River for a while before turning inland toward a series of rolling hills. "Where are we going?" Katie asked, admiring the stark beauty of the desert landscape. "It's a surprise," Tyler replied with a grin. "Not much further now." They crested a hill, and Katie gasped at the view that opened before them. A small valley lay below, sheltered by rocky outcroppings and filled with an unexpected sea of golden grasses. A clear stream meandered through it, and near the water stood a half-built cabin, its log walls rising against the blue sky. "Tyler," she breathed, "what is this place?" "My land," he answered, pride evident in his voice. 500 acres. The ranch house where Jamie and I live now belongs to the bank I rent it while I build this place up. But this," he gestured to the valley, "this is all mine. Paid for free and clear last month." He urged his horse forward, and Katy followed, taking in the serene beauty of the hidden valley. When they reached the cabin, Tyler helped her dismount, his hands lingering at her waist a moment longer than necessary. "It's beautiful," Katy said sincerely. "How long have you been building?" "Started in the spring. Been working on it whenever I can get away from the smithy." Tyler led her toward the cabin. "It's not much yet, but come spring, I'll finish the roof and the interior." Inside, the cabin was simple but solidly built, with a stone fireplace at one end and windows placed to capture the morning and afternoon light. Tyler had clearly put thought into every detail. "I thought maybe a garden here," he said, pointing to a cleared area near the stream. "And the barn will go there, on the rise where it'll stay dry when the stream rises in spring." As Tyler described his plans, Katy could see the future he envisioned: cattle grazing on the hillsides, crops in the fertile bottomland, children playing by the stream. The image was so vivid it took her breath away. "Why are you showing me this?" she asked quietly when he paused. Tyler turned to her, his expression serious. "Because I want you to see the future I'm building." And because he hesitated, then plunged ahead, "because I'm hoping someday you might want to be part of it." Katy's heart seemed to stop, then race ahead. "Tyler, we've only known each other a short time." "I know," he acknowledged. "I'm not asking for promises today. Just wanted you to understand that my interest in you isn't passing or casual. When I care for someone, it's for keeps." Katy was silent, overwhelmed by the depth of feeling between them and the seriousness of what he was suggesting. Tyler watched her, patient yet clearly anxious for her response. "I came to Fort Yuma to find independence," she finally said. "To discover who I might be when I wasn't defined by my family." Tyler nodded, disappointment flickering in his eyes. "But," Katy continued, moving closer to him, "I'm finding that who I am might include being someone who cares very deeply for a certain blacksmith and his nephew." Hope replaced the disappointment in Tyler's gaze. Yes, Katy confirmed, smiling up at him. "I would very much like to see where this leads, Tyler Grayson." This time when he leaned down, Katy didn't turn away. His lips met hers in a gentle, questioning kiss that sent warmth spreading through her entire body. When they parted, Tyler's smile was radiant. "Was that all right?" "For your first kiss, I think," Katy said shyly, "that I might need more practice to be certain." Tyler laughed and obliged her, his second kiss still gentle but more confident, his arms encircling her waist to draw her closer. Katy found herself responding instinctively, her hands moving to his shoulders as she rose slightly on her toes to better meet his lips. When they finally separated, both were breathing faster. Tyler pressed his forehead to hers, eyes closed as though memorizing the moment. "We should head back," he said reluctantly. "People will talk if we're gone too long." "Let them talk," Katy replied with uncharacteristic boldness. "I'm not ashamed of how I feel." Tyler's eyes darkened. "And how do you feel, Miss Davis?" "Happy," she said simply. "Happier than I've been in a very long time." The ride back to Fort Yuma was filled with comfortable conversation and shared laughter. Tyler told her stories of his childhood on the Arizona frontier, while Katy shared tales of her more sheltered upbringing in San Francisco. By the time they reached the edge of town, Katy felt as though she'd known Tyler all her life. Their newfound closeness did not go unnoticed in the small community. Over the following weeks, Katy became accustomed to knowing glances and the occasional teasing comment from her students. Jamie, for his part, seemed to view the development with a mixture of embarrassment and approval. December brought preparations for Christmas, and a surprising cold snap that dusted Fort Yuma with a rare coating of frost. The schoolhouse, poorly insulated, was particularly chilly, forcing Katie to dismiss classes early on the coldest days. It was on one such afternoon that Sarah Miller cornered her as Katie was locking up the schoolhouse. "Miss Davis," Sarah greeted her, her tone less than friendly. "Do you have a moment?" "Of course, Mrs. Miller," Katie replied cautiously. "How can I help you?" Sarah adjusted her shawl, her pretty face set in determined lines. "I think we should speak frankly, woman to woman. Your relationship with Tyler Grayson has progressed rather quickly." Katie straightened. "I'm not sure that's any concern of yours, Mrs. Miller." "It is when I see a good man being led astray," Sarah retorted. "Tyler needs a practical woman who understands frontier life, not some city girl playing at being a teacher until something better comes along." The unfairness of the accusation stung. "I assure you, Mrs. Miller, my feelings for Mr. Grayson are genuine, as is my commitment to teaching." Sarah's expression softened slightly. "Perhaps they are for now. But what happens when winter turns harsh, or Apache raids threaten the town, or the isolation becomes too much? Will you stay then, or run back to your comfortable San Francisco life?" The question hit closer to home than Katie wanted to admit. She had sometimes wondered the same thing herself during lonely nights at the boarding house. "I don't know what the future holds," Katie said honestly. "But I do know that I care deeply for Tyler and Jamie, and I've come to care for Fort Yuma too." Sarah studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Fair enough. Just remember, Miss Davis, out here we survive by being honest with others and with ourselves." With those words, she turned and walked away, leaving Katie troubled and thoughtful. That evening, when Tyler came to call at the boarding house, Katie was still preoccupied with Sarah's words. They sat in the small parlor, chaperoned by Mrs. Miller's disinterested presence as she knitted in the corner. "Something's bothering you," Tyler observed after several minutes of distracted conversation. "Want to tell me what it is?" Katie hesitated, then decided honesty was indeed best. "I had a conversation with Sarah Miller today. She questioned my intentions toward you." Tyler's expression darkened. Sarah had no right to do that. Perhaps not, but some of what she said made sense. Katie took a deep breath. "Tyler, I need to know, do you ever worry that I'm not suited for life here? That someday I might want to return to San Francisco?" Tyler considered the question carefully. "I'd be lying if I said it never crossed my mind. You had a different life there with comforts Fort Yuma can't provide." "That's not an answer," Katie pressed. "All right." Tyler leaned forward, taking her hands in his. "Here's my answer. I believe in you, Katie Davis. I've watched you tackle every challenge this town has thrown at you with grace and determination. If you decide to stay in Fort Yuma with me or without me, it won't be because it's easy. It'll be because you choose it." Eyes wide open. His faith in her brought tears to Katie's eyes. "And if I did choose to stay with you," Tyler's grip on her hands tightened, "then I'd be the happiest man in the Arizona territory. But Katie, I don't want you to feel rushed or pressured. We have time." But time, as it happened, was not on their side. 2 days before Christmas, a letter arrived for Katie. Her aunt in San Francisco had suffered a stroke and was asking for her. The stagecoach would leave the following morning, the last one before weather likely closed the mountain passes until spring. Katie found Tyler at the smithy, working despite the late hour. His face fell as she explained the situation. "You have to go," he said immediately, setting down his hammer. "Family comes first, always." "I know," but Katie struggled to express her fear that leaving might mean the end of what they'd begun to build together. Tyler seemed to understand without her saying it. He pulled her into his arms, unconcerned about the soot that might mar her dress. "Listen to me, Katie Davis. You go take care of your aunt. I'll be right here when you're ready to come back." "You sound very certain I will come back," Katie said, trying to smile through her worry. Tyler tilted her chin up to look into her eyes. I am certain. Because what we have isn't something either of us will find again. But if I'm wrong, if you get to San Francisco and realize that's where you belong, then I'll understand. I'll be heartbroken, but I'll understand. I don't want to leave you, Katie whispered. Or Jamie, or my students. I know. But sometimes love means doing the hard thing. Tyler pressed a kiss to her forehead. Write to me. Every week, Katie promised. The next morning, the entire town seemed to turn out to see Katie off. Her students presented her with a crudely bound book of their writings and drawings. Mrs. Goodwin, usually so stern, embraced her warmly and extracted a promise that she would return for the spring term. Jamie, struggling against tears, gave her a small carved horse that he'd made himself. And then there was Tyler, standing slightly apart, his face carefully composed. When it was time to board the stagecoach, he stepped forward and, to the scandal and delight of the onlookers, pulled Katie into his arms for a kiss that left no doubt about his feelings. Come back to me, he murmured against her ear. Whatever happens in San Francisco, just come back. With tears streaming down her face, Katie boarded the stagecoach. As it pulled away, she kept her eyes fixed on Tyler's tall figure until Fort Yuma disappeared from view. San Francisco was both familiar and strange. The city of Katie's childhood seemed smaller somehow, its elegant houses and bustling streets less impressive than she remembered. Her aunt, thankfully, was recovering slowly but steadily, though the doctors estimated it would be at least 2 months before she could manage on her own. Katie threw herself into nursing duties, grateful for the distraction from her homesickness for Fort Yuma, for it was homesickness. She realized this constant ache for the dusty streets, the schoolhouse, for Tyler and Jamie and the life she'd begun to build there. Letters from Arizona were her lifeline. Tyler wrote faithfully, his penmanship labored but his words heartfelt. He told her of progress on the cabin, of Jamie's improved grades, of town gossip and his daily work. Each letter ended the same way. We miss you. I miss you. Come home when you can. January passed in a blur of nursing duties and social obligations as Katie's San Francisco connections rediscovered her presence. Her aunt's friends made pointed comments about eligible bachelors and how fortunate Katie was to have escaped that dreadful frontier town. Katie smiled politely, but found herself defending Fort Yuma with increasing passion. February brought Aunt Margaret's marked improvement and an unexpected visitor. Katie returned from a shopping errand one afternoon to find a dusty, travel-worn Tyler Grayson sitting in her aunt's parlor, hat in hand, looking decidedly out of place among the delicate furniture. Tyler, she gasped, packages tumbling from her arms as she rushed to him. He rose to catch her, his embrace lifting her off her feet. Surprise, he said simply, his voice rough with emotion. What are you doing here? How? Sold some cattle. Used the money to make the trip. He set her down but kept his hands at her waist. Couldn't wait until spring to see you. Aunt Margaret, watching from her chair by the fire, cleared her throat meaningfully. Katherine, perhaps you should introduce your friend properly. Blushing, Katie made the introductions. Her aunt's expression was difficult to read as she assessed Tyler with shrewd eyes. So you're the blacksmith who's stolen my niece's heart, she said finally. Katherine's letters speak of little else these days. I hope to be worthy of her good opinion, madam, Tyler replied with a dignity that made Katie's heart swell with pride. HMPH, we shall see. But there was a twinkle in Aunt Margaret's eye that suggested she was not entirely displeased. The week of Tyler's visit passed in a whirlwind. Katie showed him the city, the harbor with its forest of ship masts, the bustling markets, the elegant homes on Nob Hill. Tyler took it all in with interest but without envy. "It's impressive," he acknowledged as they stood overlooking the bay, "but it's not home, not for me." "Nor for me, I think," Katie admitted, surprising herself with the certainty of the statement. "I keep looking for stars at night, but the city lights are too bright." Tyler's smile was gentle. "Fort Yuma has plenty of stars." On his last evening in San Francisco, Tyler took Katie to dinner at one of the city's finest restaurants, clearly having saved for the occasion. Afterward, they walked along the waterfront, the cool February air giving Katie an excuse to stay close to his side. "I have something to ask you," Tyler said as they paused to look out at the moonlight reflecting on the water. Katie's heart skipped a beat. "Yes, I know it's soon. Too soon, maybe. But these weeks apart have shown me that what I feel for you isn't going to change." Tyler turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. "I love you, Katie Davis. I want to build a life with you in Fort Yuma on my ranch, wherever our path leads us." He released one of her hands to reach into his pocket, withdrawing a small box. "This was my mother's," he said, opening it to reveal a simple gold band with a single small diamond. "Would you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" Katie stared at the ring, overwhelmed by emotion. "Tyler, before you answer," he interrupted gently, "I want you to know that I understand if you need more time, if you want to stay in San Francisco longer, or if you're not ready for marriage yet. I'll wait, however long it takes." His patience and understanding only confirmed what Katie already knew in her heart. "I don't need more time," she said, smiling through sudden tears. "I love you, Tyler Grayson. Yes, I'll marry you." The joy that transformed his face was worth every moment of uncertainty she'd felt. Tyler slid the ring onto her finger, then pulled her into a kiss that promised a lifetime of happiness. When they finally returned to Aunt Margaret's house, Tyler respectfully asked for her blessing. The older woman studied them both for a long moment before giving a decisive nod. "Katherine has always had good judgment," she said. "If she's chosen you, Mr. Grayson, then you must be a man of substance. You have my blessing, but on one condition." "Name it," Tyler said without hesitation. "The wedding will be here in San Francisco before Katherine returns to that desert outpost. I insist on seeing my only niece properly married." Tyler looked to Katie, who nodded her agreement. "We'd be honored, Aunt Margaret, but it will have to be small and soon." "Tyler needs to get back to Jamie and the ranch." 3 weeks, Aunt Margaret declared. "I can arrange everything in 3 weeks." And so it was settled. Tyler returned to Fort Yuma the next day to make arrangements, promising to return with Jamie for the wedding. Katie threw herself into wedding preparations, her heart lighter than it had been in months. True to his word, Tyler arrived 2.5 weeks later with a reluctant but scrubbed Jamie in tow, along with Reverend Thomas, who had insisted on performing the ceremony. To Katie's surprise, Mrs. Goodwin and Lillian had also made the journey. "Couldn't let our teacher get married without us," Mrs. Goodwin said gruffly. "The school board approved the expense." The wedding took place in Aunt Margaret's garden, where early spring flowers were just beginning to bloom. Katie wore a simple white dress with lace at the collar and cuffs, her mother's pearl earrings her only jewelry besides Tyler's ring. Jamie, uncomfortable but proud in a new suit, stood as his uncle's best man. When Reverend Thomas pronounced them husband and wife, Tyler's kiss was both tender and possessive, a promise of the life they would build together. The small gathering of San Francisco society and Fort Yuma transplants cheered none louder than Jamie, who had finally embraced the idea of Katie becoming his aunt. The newlyweds spent 3 days in a small hotel in Sausalito before beginning the journey home. Aunt Margaret, fully recovered now, hugged Katie fiercely at their departure. "Be happy, my dear," she whispered. And remember, you can always come back if that wild territory becomes too much." "I'll be fine, Aunt Margaret," Katie assured her. "I'm going home." The journey back to Arizona was long but filled with anticipation. Jamie, riding ahead with Reverend Thomas and the others, gave the newlyweds as much privacy as the crowded stagecoach would allow. Tyler held Katie's hand for most of the journey, sometimes lifting it to his lips in a gesture that still made her blush. "Nervous?" he asked as they neared Fort Yuma. "A little," Katie admitted. "Everything will be different now." "In all the best ways," Tyler promised. Fort Yuma welcomed them home with a celebration that rivaled the Thanksgiving feast. The entire town turned out to congratulate the newlyweds and hear stories of San Francisco. Even Sarah Miller offered sincere good wishes, her earlier animosity apparently forgotten. That night, in the small ranch house that would be their temporary home until the cabin was completed, Katie and Tyler began their married life with a sweetness that exceeded all her expectations. His touch was gentle yet confident, his patience infinite as she navigated the unfamiliar waters of physical intimacy. In his arms, Katie found a passion she hadn't known she possessed, and a completeness she had never imagined possible. "Are you happy, Mrs. Grayson?" Tyler asked as they lay together in the darkness. "Completely," Katie answered truthfully, nestling closer to his warmth. "And you, more than I ever thought I could be again." His arms tightened around her. "I never expected to find love twice in one lifetime." "Tell me about her," Katie said softly. "About Alina." Tyler was quiet for a long moment, his hand stroking Katie's hair. She was kind, strong, had to be to marry a man with nothing but dreams. "We were young, not much older than Jamie is now, grew up together. You loved her very much." "I did, still do in a way, but it's different now." Tyler turned to look into Katie's eyes. "What I feel for you doesn't diminish what I had with her, it's just another chapter, a beautiful one I never thought I'd get to read." Katie kissed him, heart full of gratitude for this man who could love so deeply and honestly. "I'm glad you found me, Tyler Grayson." "No, Katie Grayson," he corrected with a smile she could feel against her lips. "I think you found me. Spring brought new beginnings." Katie returned to teaching, now riding to and from school with Jamie each day. The students adjusted quickly to calling her Mrs. Grayson, though some of the younger ones still slipped and called her Miss Davis, which always made her smile. Tyler worked tirelessly on their cabin, determined to have it ready before summer's heat made construction difficult. Katie joined him whenever she could, learning to drive nails and seal chinks between logs. Jamie, too, threw himself into the project with unprecedented enthusiasm. "You're good for him," Tyler observed one evening as they watched Jamie carefully setting glass panes in the cabin's windows. "For both of us." "And you're good for me," Katie replied, leaning against her husband's solid strength. "I came to Fort Yuma looking for purpose. I found a family instead." By late May, the cabin was ready for occupancy just in time, as it turned out, for Katie had begun to suspect that their family would be expanding sooner than expected. When her suspicion was confirmed by Doc Wilson, she waited until they had moved into the new cabin to share the news with Tyler. They were sitting on the porch, watching the sunset paint the valley in shades of gold and purple, when Katie took her husband's hand and placed it gently on her still flat stomach. "We're going to need that extra bedroom sooner than we thought," she said softly. Tyler's expression transformed from confusion to wonder to joy in the space of a heartbeat. "A baby? You're sure?" Katie nodded, laughing as Tyler whooped and swept her into his arms, spinning her around on the porch. Jamie, hearing the commotion, came running from the barn. "What's happening?" he demanded. Tyler set Katie down but kept his arm around her waist. "Your aunt has some news, nephew." Katie smiled at the boy who had become so dear to her. "How would you feel about being a cousin, Jamie?" Jamie's eyes widened as he processed her meaning. "A baby, for real." "For real," Tyler confirmed, his voice thick with emotion. "Come January, there'll be another Grayson in this valley." To Katie's surprise, Jamie's eyes filled with tears. He quickly wiped them away, embarrassed, but not before she had seen the complex emotions: their joy, worry, perhaps a touch of jealousy. "That's great," he said, his voice cracking slightly. "Really great." Later that night, after Tyler had fallen asleep, Katie found Jamie sitting on the porch steps, staring at the star-filled sky. She sat beside him, wrapping a blanket around both their shoulders against the night chill. "Want to talk about it?" she asked gently. Jamie shrugged, then nodded. "Will things change? When the baby comes?" "Some things will," Katie acknowledged honestly. "Babies need a lot of attention. There will be crying and late nights and new responsibilities for all of us." Jamie nodded soberly. "But the important things won't change, Jamie," Katie continued. "How much we love you, your place in this family, that's permanent. Promise." "I promise." Katie wrapped her arm around his shoulders, and after a moment he leaned into her embrace. "You know, this baby is going to need a big cousin to look up to. Someone to teach them how to ride and fish and all the things you're good at." A small smile tugged at Jamie's lips. "I could do that. I know you can, and you'll be wonderful at it." They sat in companionable silence for a while longer before Jamie spoke again, his voice small in the darkness. "I'm glad Uncle Tyler found you." "Me too," Katie said, her heart full. "So very glad." The months that followed were filled with preparation and anticipation. Katie continued teaching until December, when the growing discomfort of her pregnancy and the onset of winter made the daily ride to town impractical. The school board arranged for Lillian to take over her classes temporarily, with Katie providing lessons plans from home. Tyler expanded his blacksmith business, hiring an assistant so he could spend more time on the ranch, building up their herd of cattle and preparing for the baby. He built a cradle with his own hands, lovingly carving the family's initials into the headboard. Jamie, true to his word, took his future role as cousin seriously. He read every book on babies he could find in Fort Yuma's small library and helped Tyler prepare a nursery in the small room adjacent to the master bedroom. Christmas came, bringing with it a rare snowfall that transformed the valley into a winter wonderland. The three Graysons celebrated quietly at home, exchanging simple gifts and sharing a feast that Katie managed to prepare despite her unwieldy shape. As they sat by the fire after dinner, Tyler handed Katie a small package wrapped in brown paper. "One more gift," he said, his expression tender. Inside was a journal bound in soft leather, the pages blank and waiting. "I thought you might want to write down our story," Tyler explained. "For the baby, so they'll know how we found each other." Tears filled Katie's eyes at the thoughtfulness of the gift. "It's perfect, thank you." "Should I start at the beginning?" she asked, dipping her pen into the inkwell later that night. "With how I came to Fort Yuma?" Tyler, watching from their bed, shook his head. "Start with the moment everything changed, the moment I knew you were different." Katie thought for a moment, then began to write. "I've never been kissed," she said. The cowboy took off his hat and replied, "Let's start slow." January 15, 1879, brought the birth of Thomas James Grayson after a long labor that tested Katie's strength and Tyler's nerves. Doc Wilson, summoned from town through a winter storm, pronounced the boy as healthy as a horse colt, despite his early arrival. Holding her son for the first time, Katie felt a love so fierce and protective it took her breath away. Tyler, his face wet with unashamed tears, seemed unable to stop touching the baby's tiny fingers and downy head. He has your eyes, Tyler whispered in wonder. And your chin, Katie replied, tracing the stubborn little jut that did indeed resemble his father's. He's perfect. Jamie, allowed into the room after Katie had been cleaned up and settled, approached the bed with uncharacteristic shyness. Can I see him? Katie patted the edge of the bed and Jamie carefully sat beside her, peering at the bundle in her arms. The baby chose that moment to yawn and stretch, one tiny fist escaping the blanket. He's so small, Jamie marveled, but his hands look like Uncle Tyler's already. Would you like to hold your cousin? Katie offered. The look of terror and longing on Jamie's face made both adults smile. Tyler showed him how to support the baby's head, and with infinite care, Jamie cradled little Thomas in his arms. Hello, Thomas, he whispered. I'm your cousin Jamie. I'm going to teach you everything I know. As Katie watched the 3 generations of Grayson men together, Tyler with his hand on Jamie's shoulder, Jamie holding the newest addition to their family, she felt a sense of completion that transcended anything she had ever imagined for herself. This was what she had been searching for when she left San Francisco. Not just independence or adventure, but belonging. A family created not just by blood but by choice and love and shared dreams. Spring came early that year, as though nature itself was celebrating new beginnings. By March, the valley was carpeted with wildflowers, and Katie began taking Thomas outside for short walks, pointing out butterflies and birds to the wide-eyed infant. Tyler expanded their vegetable garden and started breaking ground for wheat on the fertile bottomland. Jamie, now 14, took on increasing responsibility with the small herd of cattle, proving himself capable beyond his years. In May, a letter arrived from Aunt Margaret, announcing her intention to visit in the summer to meet her great-nephew. The news was met with mixed emotions: pleasure at the upcoming visit, anxiety about whether the refined San Franciscan would approve of the home Katie and Tyler had built. She'll love it, Tyler assured Katie as they prepared for bed one night. Because you love it, because you're happy here. I am happy, Katie confirmed, settling into her husband's embrace. Happier than I ever imagined possible. Tyler's arms tightened around her. Any regrets about leaving your old life behind? Katie thought of the bustling city she'd left, the comforts and conveniences, the social circles and cultural opportunities. Then she looked around at the cabin they'd built together, listened to Thomas's soft breathing from his cradle nearby, remembered Jamie's proud smile earlier that day when he'd shown her the calf he'd helped deliver. Not a single one, she said truthfully. This is where I belong, with you. With our family. Tyler kissed her then, a kiss full of promise and gratitude, and a love that had grown stronger with each passing day. Outside, the stars shone brilliantly over the valley that was now their home, the home that had begun with a shy admission and a cowboy's gentle response. I've never been kissed, she said. The cowboy took off his hat and replied, let's start slow. And they had. Step by step, day by day, building a life together in this wild, beautiful territory that had once seemed so foreign to Katie. Now, as she returned her husband's kiss with all the passion and love in her heart, she knew that the slow beginning had led them exactly where they were meant to be together, under the vast Arizona sky, with a lifetime of tomorrows stretching before them. In the years that followed, the Grayson Ranch prospered. 2 more children joined the family: Elizabeth Margaret in 1881 and Michael Tyler in 1883. Jamie, after graduating from school, chose to stay on the ranch, eventually building his own cabin on the property and marrying Lillian Parker in a ceremony performed by Reverend Thomas on the same porch where Katie and Tyler had spent so many contented evenings. Katie never returned to formal teaching, but her love of education found new outlets. She taught her own children and, eventually, other ranchers' children whose homes were too remote for regular attendance at the Fort Yuma school. The library she established in their home became a gathering place for neighbors seeking knowledge or simply good company on long winter evenings. Tyler's blacksmith shop in town was eventually taken over by his apprentice, allowing him to focus on the ranch full-time. Under his careful management, the Grayson herd grew to be one of the finest in the territory, and their wheat fields yielded bountifully most years. There were hardships, of course, drought years that tested their resilience, an outbreak of fever that nearly took young Elizabeth, the constant challenges of frontier life. But through it all, the foundation of love and mutual respect that Katie and Tyler had built sustained them. On their 20th wedding anniversary, as they sat on the porch of the cabin that had been expanded over the years to accommodate their growing family, Tyler presented Katie with a new journal, the old one having been filled with the story of their life together. "For the next chapter," he said, his hair now streaked with silver but his blue eyes still as bright as the day they'd met. "There's still so much to write," Katie agreed, leaning against the shoulder that had been her strength through 2 decades of joy and sorrow, triumph and challenge. Inside, their children were preparing a surprise celebration. Thomas, now a serious young man of 19 considering medical school in California. Elizabeth, a 16-year-old beauty with her father's blue eyes and her mother's determination. And Michael, 15, already showing signs of being the most skilled horseman in the family. Jamie and Lillian would arrive soon with their 3 children, and neighbors would gather to honor the couple whose love story had become something of a legend in Fort Yuma. But for now, in the quiet of the early evening, it was just the 2 of them, the schoolteacher who had ventured west seeking independence and the blacksmith who had taught her that love was not a constraint but the greatest freedom of all. Was it worth it? Tyler asked softly, his hand finding hers as it had countless times over the years. "This life we've built," Katie looked out over the valley that had witnessed their struggles and triumphs, that had nurtured their children and provided for their needs. She thought of the young woman who had stepped off that stagecoach so many years ago, afraid but determined, and the man who had seen in her a strength she hadn't known she possessed. "Every moment," she said, her heart as full now as it had been on the day she'd first realized she loved him. Every single moment. As the sun set over their valley, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Tyler leaned down to kiss his wife, no longer the tentative kiss of new lovers, but the deep, knowing kiss of 2 people whose lives had been woven together into something stronger and more beautiful than either could have created alone. And in that kiss was the memory of a beginning, a shy confession on a boarding house porch, a cowboy's gentle understanding, and the promise of a love that would only grow stronger with each passing year. "I've never been kissed," she said. The cowboy took off his hat and replied, "Let's start slow." And they had, and it had made all the difference.